Last week, I hosted an exclusive webinar for our VIP clients here at the Selling Silicon Valley Group, but I thought, you know what? There was so much great information that was delivered in that webinar. Why not bring it to our YouTube family as well? And so in today's Silicon Valley Snapshot, a very special snapshot, I'm going to be sharing with you the webinar and the contents of the webinar. And so all of the data that your heart desires is going to be delivered in that webinar. But before we get into the video, before we get into the webinar, if you are a home buyer in today's marketplace and you're looking for a data set that's similar to the data that we're going to be sharing on that webinar, for any area that you're looking in, you can go ahead and text the word data plus the area, the zip code, or the neighborhood that you're searching in, and we will get that data delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're a home seller in today's marketplace, you're wondering, is now the right time for me to sell? And if I do sell, what should I price my property for? All of those questions can be answered when you text the word data plus your property address to the number down below. Without further ado, welcome to Selling Silicon Valley Group's State of the Housing Market webinar. First of all, just to introduce myself, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Danny Gould. I am the CEO of the Selling Silicon Valley Group, and I called this webinar about a week ago. I've seen some things in the market that I think need to be addressed as soon as possible. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to bring some educational content to all of you so that you can really make the most empowered home buying decision making possible. Because for us here, yes, this is a brutal market and there's a lot of uncertainty and I understand that. And so if I can help educate you and help bring some clarity to your decision making, then we've won. Whether it's I need to buy today or I'm not going to buy for another 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is, whatever the message is that you get today is what I'm looking to do, is to make sure that we walk away feeling educated and feeling empowered. So let's dive right into it. I know that right now, the question on everyone's mind, it's fresh. Is now the right time to buy? And I've been selling homes for 8 years now. I get this question asked pretty much every single year. At any time of the year, it could be January, it could be July, it could be November. Everyone always asks, is now the right time to buy? And especially right now, prices are going up, and they're not just going up a little bit, they're going up a lot. If you watch our YouTube channel, which by the way, if you're not subscribed, Selling Silicon Valley TV on YouTube, we post weekly content, weekly stats content. So a lot of the stuff that you're seeing today, if you've seen our YouTube channel, this might feel like you've seen this stuff before, because you have. We cover this every single week on our YouTube channel. And at the end of last year, if you go watch those videos, I predicted that this market was going to happen almost exactly the way it's played out up until this point. And so right now we are going through what I call a period of time of hyper appreciation, not hyperinflation, hyper appreciation. And the reason I called this emergency webinar today is to let all of you on this call who are our VIP clients know that we are really at the precipice of it. We're right at the start of this hyper appreciation zone. And what really just put me over the edge and made me decide to call this meeting was a home that our team made an offer on this last week. And it was my first real life experience with this. Now, I've been talking about it for many, many months, but this was my first actual experience seeing like, oh my gosh, we are in the hyper appreciation zone. And it's this property right here, Cindy Way. So Cindy Way is in Pleasanton, and it's currently pending right now. We are not representing the buyer on this transaction. However, we do have a lot of insider information as to what's going on with this home. And let me just be very blunt. This is the preview of what's to come. So Cindy Way is a 2,700 square foot home, 4 bedrooms in Pleasanton. It's a beautiful home. Don't get me wrong. But there's really nothing that special about it. If we look at the comparables here for Cindy Way, what you'll see, list price of the home was $2.45 million, which to me, after reviewing the comparables, was a little high. If we look at some of the other homes here that were recently sold in the community, some a little bit below in terms of square footage, so 2,500 square feet all the way through 3,000 square feet, none of them had sold for more than $2.3 million. And here was this ambitious agent who had actually priced the property for $2.45 million. So $150,000 over what I would have comped the property for. I've comped a lot of homes. So I felt very confident in the 2.3 number. I did not feel so confident in the 2.45 number. That being said, we ran our negotiation strategy. So if you are working with one of our agents, I assume if you're on this call, you'll know that we have a very structured way of negotiating with the listing agent. And so we ran our 3-point negotiation strategy to a T on this property. We're able to get a commitment from the listing agent to actually let us know what the highest offer was at the time that we submitted. And so I believe it was 4 p.m. is when the offer deadline was. So at 4 p.m., we had a conversation with the listing agent, and she said that the highest offer at that point was in the 2.6s. So our client decided to go in right at where we felt was going to be competitive relative to that 2.6 figure that she had thrown out. 30 minutes later, she called us back saying she had 2 offers well over $2.9 million. This home is currently pending for what we believe to be somewhere between the $2.95 and $3 million mark. So keep in mind, nothing in this entire community that's comparable to this home has really sold for over 2.3 million. So what we're seeing right now is nearly a 30% increase in pricing in the matter of a day. This is concerning. Obviously, if you're a home buyer in today's marketplace, you're looking at this information, you're like, oh my gosh, well, what does this mean for me? And so don't worry, there's some good news, there's some not so great news, and all sorts of different flavors of news throughout this whole presentation. So don't feel like it's all bad news. So this is the Cindy Way home. And this is the reason why we call this webinar, because this is the preview of what's going to be happening here for the next 90 to 120 days. Okay. So the question that a lot of us are probably asking ourselves after seeing that is, when is this going to stop? Well, I've been selling homes for a long time now, and this market reminds me very much of 2018. We started off the year 2018 hotter than hot, and it cooled off. It started to cool off about mid-year. It's very simple. Now, the inventory levels in 2018 were actually much higher than they are right now. And so there could be reason to believe that the 2022 market will sustain longer because of the decrease, or the historically low, really, inventory levels in the entire Bay Area. So the good news for all of us on this call is that we are, in my estimation, about 15 days into what will likely be a 90 to 120 day period of hyper appreciation. So there is, if you're on this call right now as a buyer, there is still time to get ahead of this market. You still have an opportunity to lock in a home and close well before we reach the tippity top of this market. And I think we can all agree that history tends to repeat itself. So what I want to do is invite all of you to look at some of the data from 2018, kind of compare it to where we are right now. And this is going to allow us together on this call to reach or gather and get to some conclusions as a group. So first things first, I want to get acclimated with what these graphs tell us, because I'm going to be showing a lot of these, and I want to make sure that all of us on this call understand what these graphs mean. So red line represents pending sales. So in March of 2021 in Fremont, we had 170 homes pending versus only 88 homes for sale. So sold inventory was 117, which is this number right down here. Now, for any of you who have seen our YouTube content, who have ever seen me speak before on the Silicon Valley marketplace, you'll know that I don't really look at sold data. Why? It's lagging information, meaning when a property sells, it's because it actually went pending 30 to 45 days ago. And so pending data actually gives us real-time information on what the demand is right now today, because it shows us this is what went pending in March relative to the amount of homes that were active on the market. So when we look at this information, I'm going to be coming back to this pendings versus inventory, which basically comes back to the basic economic principle, basic economic theory of supply and demand. Pending sales representing or being the best representation we have of buyer demand versus for sale, which is the best representation we have of supply. So this is what Fremont looked like in 2021. So from November, if you guys can see here, all of these will be showing from November to January, from 2020 to 2022, or 2017 to 2019. We're going to see both of these here. So in Fremont, this is what it looked like last year, essentially, or for the last 15 months. Now, this is what it looked like in 2018. So in 2018, we saw, as you can see right here, from January all the way up and through June, really, of that year, we had this period of sustained demand well over supply, meaning we had way more demand than we did supply. And what happens in markets like this is we start to see prices go up very, 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 very quickly. And so, by the way, like, I just want caveat here right now. If 99% of the country would see these graphs, they would be besides themselves, because this is not normal, but it is normal for Silicon Valley, and it is normal for the Bay Area. Well, much more normal than it is in almost any other marketplace in the country, because typically supply outpaces pending sales practically every single month. And even if pending sales are at 50% of inventory, so even if we had, let's just say here, 83 homes pending versus 126, even if we were there, we would still be in most marketplaces that would still be considered a wonderful seller's market. So right now, so even when it's really bad here in 2018, I just want to make sure everyone understands that even when it seems very bad, when demand dips below supply, we're still in what most economists would consider a seller's market. But relative to where we were earlier in the year, it feels slow. And this is exactly what happened in 2018. I can remember the day when I realized in 2018, we were not going to be experiencing the same market conditions. And I was sitting at an open house for one of my listings at the time in Willow Glen. It was around a $2.45 million home. We had a ton of traffic come through, and we had 0 offers on the property. And that was the day that I realized, because the week before, we had a few listings on the market, and every listing sold with like 10 offers. So within a matter of a few weeks, the market turned pretty dramatically. And for a few months there, by we, I mean the real estate community was very puzzled as to what was going on. What happened though in Fremont, and just so that you guys, so this is Fremont, and we're going to go over a few other examples here, but in Fremont, we look at closed sales in Fremont. So I took some, what I did here was, just so that everyone understands, is I took data from what we feel are very average sales in each marketplace, which is a home that's 2,000 to 3,000 square feet and 3 to 4 bedrooms. So we found all of those in Fremont and all the cities that I'm about to show you in April and in November of 2018. So if you can see here, all of these homes here had a close of escrow date in April of 2018. And all of these properties here had a close of escrow in November of 2018. So why am I showing you this? Well, what I want us to contrast here is what the average price per square foot was in April versus November of 2018. Because if we look at this graph, and so just so that we remember here what this graph looked like, 2018 in April was white hot, and November of 2018 seemingly would be way, way less hot to the average consumer. Well, what did that mean for home prices? If you look at this graph, or if you look at these comparables, the answer is not much. The average price per square foot in April of that year was $723. So what we would consider close to, if not the peak of pricing in April, was $723 versus in November, which many months after we experienced a shift in buyer versus seller activity, $713 a foot. What we had here effectively was a 1.5% decrease in pricing over the course of 7 months in what everyone felt like, oh my gosh, this is Armageddon. The prices are going to come crashing down. They didn't. They were very stable, even while buyer activity turned dramatically and inventory levels rose. So let's continue forward. In San Mateo, this is what San Mateo marketplace looked like over the last 15 months. As you can see, there's practically way more demand than there is supply, beginning in January of last year up and through January of this year. And if you notice, we're starting to see a little bit of demand. We're starting to see demand fall a little bit relative to supply. So that trend of demand outpacing supply has been broken in January of this year. Now, if we compare that to what we saw in 2018, it's actually very similar. So we had pendings and inventory levels practically neck and neck at the beginning of 2018. And I'll highlight that for all of you that are having trouble following here. So but here we were neck and neck, almost like we were at this time right now. In San Mateo, we experienced pending or demand outpacing supply all the way through July of 2018. So what I did was I took what I felt were probably the peak of the market, which is going to be somewhere in June, July timeframe. So sales that posted in July that went pending in June versus likely what was the lowest point of the market, which is closings in October, November timeframe. So if we look, it paid a little bit more to wait. So in San Mateo, we see here, and same concept, by the way, as Fremont. So I'm not going to over explain every single time. But if we just look here, the average price per square foot in June, so closings in June, were $1,000 a foot. Now, if we look at October closings, we're at $943 a foot. If we went to November, it fell even more. It fell to like $920 a foot. So there was a significant drop off in San Mateo. And for all of you who are watching that are looking in San Mateo, this is good information for you. This is the only county that behaved like this, by the way. So I'm going to spoiler alert. It's the only one that actually had a significant drop off. So we're talking a drop off of anywhere, just judging or just based on how you look at it, anywhere from 5 to 7%. Now, what we're not accounting for here is the differences in everything in homes and everything. So there could be some more nuances here that we're not really, digging really super deep and granular into. What I'm looking at right now is macro trends, macro data. All right. In San Ramon, all of us who are looking in San Ramon, this is what it's looking like right now. Let's just think about this for a second. So in January of this year, we're seeing 53 homes pending versus 14 homes active on the market. That's insane. And to see what is possible based on April of last year, it's going to be a bloodbath here in the next couple of months. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to make it feel any less intimidating than it really is. The great news is you're working with some of the best negotiators in Silicon Valley. So that's the good news. But unfortunately, this is going to be a bloodbath for a lot of us here on this call. Now, what did it look like in 2018? Okay, so in 2018, we see very similar to what we saw in Fremont, where the first 6-7 months or so, very frothy for home sellers. And then we start to see things taper off towards the end of the year. And I can tell you that every single city had its own unique set of circumstances. But what I did was I picked the cities that I felt were best representative of the macro trends in the Bay Area. And so when we look at San Ramon in 2018, we have an average price per square foot of $500 a foot. This is for 3 to 4 bedroom homes, anywhere from 2,000 to, I believe, 2,500 square feet or so, versus 481 in November. So we're looking at, forgive my terrible annotation there, April to November of 2018, we see a drop off of roughly 4%. And so roughly we're seeing a 4% decrease in values over the course of that 7-month time frame. Now, nothing to sneeze at. It's 4%. Right? That is fairly significant, where we're talking about $1 million home. That's $40,000. It's not an insignificant decrease. But when we start to think about interest rates, and this is where we're going to go in a second, it's all going to start to come together. We're all going to start to understand what the true impact of waiting could mean for you. Now, Santa Clara. This is not Santa Clara County, by the way. This is Santa Clara, the city. This is the data from the last 15 months. It's been sunshines and rainbows, and it's been everything. It's been awesome for home sellers and terrible for home buyers. Now, in 2018, what did it look like? Well, it looked very similar to what we see in Fremont and San Ramon, where the first, not 6 months, but actually 8 months in Santa Clara were very good for home sellers. And then the last 4 months, we started to see it taper off. Now, when we look at the comparables here, we see 748 price per square foot in April of 2018. Again, this is for a 3 to 4 bedroom home in the 2,000 to 2,500 square foot range. And then we see in November of that same year, 731. So essentially what we're seeing here is a 2% decrease in prices in Santa Clara over the course of 7 months or so. Modesto. Okay, so finally we come to Modesto. So Modesto, this is what Modesto looked like over the last 15 months or so, which is very atypical for Modesto, because if we look at 2018, we actually never see demand outpace supply. This is a normal market. This is what many marketplaces look like in the United States. This is a healthy seller's market, truthfully, even in 2018. Now, when we start to see September and October and November differentials between supply versus demand, we start to think, okay, well, what's going on with home prices? Well, the answer is really not much. So if we look at the same type of breakdown here in Modesto, we're looking at $174 a foot in April of 2018 for that same type of prototypical home that we've discussed, versus $179 in November of 2018. So what we're seeing here is actually an increase of about 2 to 3% in pricing during what the graphs that we're seeing here would tell us is a downturn in the market. Interesting. Okay, so it's time for some conclusions. So conclusion number one, home prices are going to continue to rise dramatically through the May/June timeframe. It could extend beyond that, depending on the city and the location and the specifics of that micro market. But as an overall overarching conclusion, we can safely say that history, because it tends to repeat itself, we will see prices continue to rise dramatically through May and June due to predominantly historically low inventory. And demand is another thing that we'll cover here very soon, very shortly on this presentation. However, what we really are missing right now, what we're really missing are homes for sale. Conclusion number two, the leveling off in Q3, Q4 will have little to no effect on home prices. Now, judging the market in 2018 and drawing some conclusions from what has happened before. 2018 had a roller coaster of a year. We started off very hot and then we tapered off at the end. However, if we look, these last 5 or 6 examples here, the net effect, aside from San Mateo, was practically a net neutral effect, meaning there's going to be very little effect on home prices as prices tend to taper off at the end of this year. All right, great. So Danny, you called this meeting to essentially tell us that nothing new really, because home prices are going to increase in the spring. We knew that. Home prices are probably going to taper off towards the winter like they normally do. We knew that. So where's the new information? Well, there's still a lot more to unpack here. And the next component that we really want to dive into are interest rates, because right now the question I'm seeing a lot more than anything else is, won't the rising interest rates have a negative effect on home prices? It's a fair assumption. It is a very fair assumption to make. So first of all, what I really want to do is all get an agreement that rates are going to go up. So I'm not going to ask for everyone to like nod and say, yes, I agree. But I think we can all agree here that rates are going to go up at some point this year. They already have. They've already started to go up. And to corroborate this point, this is a projection from Keeping Current Matters. It's a real estate stats indicator, basically, that put together different projections for how mortgage rates are going to rise throughout this year. So what we're seeing here is essentially a 0.4 to 0.6 increase in interest rates projected for between now and the remainder of the year. So usually the question of rates and the rates impact on pricing stems from the understanding that as rates increase, purchase power decreases, and that ultimately could affect demand. And so with that being said, when rates increase, typically these are times of economic prosperity. So as wages go up and the economy thrives, so do rates. And so what happens essentially, especially in our area where wages are super high, what essentially happens is a net neutral effect on purchase power. Because as rates go up, so are your wages, and that tends to have a net neutral effect on purchasing power. So rates are going up, but I can also buy more. So it ends up having almost a neutral effect on home buying. Now, the interesting thing, and I would say the interesting aside here, is that rates affect more home sellers here in the area than you would imagine. So when we think about who our prototypical home sellers are, we have our move-up buyers or move-up sellers who are essentially selling a smaller home to upgrade to a bigger home. Then we have our downsizers, which is the baby boomer generation right now. These are individuals who have lived in their home for 10, 15, 20 years. And now they don't need a 4-bedroom home anymore. They just need a 2-bedroom home. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I won't go too far into the weeds because if you've watched my YouTube videos, if you've watched our YouTube videos, you'll know that there's a lot of reasons why these individuals are trapped in their homes. But when we see rates increase, you know who's not earning wages are the baby boomers. They're the retired. They're the ones who are the downsizers. So the downsizers are the only ones who are really truly negatively impacted by interest rates rising, because they're the ones who have no wages to rise along with it. And so rising rates keep more downsizers locked into their current living situation, which negatively impacts inventory levels, right? So it has fairly no impact on demand and a larger impact on supply. And this is actually something that has been written about by many economists, including Robert Shiller. He's a Yale economist. He's if any of you have heard of Case-Shiller Index, it's a very well-known real estate stat curator, if you will. And so this is a very interesting graph showing that the impact that interest rates have on home prices. And what Robert Shiller has come to the conclusion to many times, and you can see this graph here right now, is that there is no direct correlation between rising rates and home prices. So what we would expect to find, or presumably you'd say, oh, wow, like rates are going up, prices should come down. Robert Shiller has proven that that is actually not the case. There is no direct correlation, in fact, between home prices and rising rates. So, conclusion number 3, while prices may stabilize in Q3, as rates are going to continue to increase, your monthly PITI will rise while prices stay neutral. So if the prices stay consistent and the interest rates go up, unfortunately, that means your monthly PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, is going to go up for the same price home. So, all right, Danny, well, what happens if the market goes down? I know I know that many of you are thinking that, and it's a great question because here's the truth, is that the market goes through ebbs and flows all the time. I can tell you in my 8 years of doing this, I have seen the market go up and down in very small increments. We're talking a couple of percentage points one way and then the other way, and then one way and the other way. This is natural. This is natural economics. And so what I did was, again, this is another Case-Shiller infographic here, going back historically in the San Francisco Bay Area all the way to 1985. And so as we can see in 1984 through 1990, we had a home appreciation increase of 100%. So again, we think of that example in Pleasanton, Cindy Way, went up 30%. Well, over the course of every single cycle, we see home prices, you see here, go up roughly 100% almost every single time. Now, in 91, we had a correction here from 91 to 94, negative 11%. The dot-com pop, obviously that's well known, negative 10%. And then of course the housing crisis in 2008, which was negative 27%. So in other words, what we're looking at here is the majority of corrections in the marketplace that we've seen here in the San Francisco Bay Area specifically. We're seeing roughly in 91, 94, and 2001, a negative 10% decrease in home prices. I think we can all agree here, and please, if you need clarification as to why we're not going to experience what we experienced in 2008 again, please make sure to ask that question. I would love to kind of help walk you through that, but I'm just going to assume that everyone on this call is informed enough to understand why that is not going to happen again. 91, 2001, we saw decreases of roughly 10% or so over the course of 1 to 3 years. So that leads us to conclusion number 4. And conclusion number 4 is, barring any catastrophe, the most that we can expect prices to fall throughout the next correction, whenever that is roughly 10%. Could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, but history is showing us that we can expect roughly a 10% decrease in home prices whenever that next correction comes for us. Okay. So what does that mean for everyone on this call? Well, if we go back to the interest rates, we go back to where we project interest rates going. This is a projection here for all the way through 2024, where we expect to see rates rise from where we're at right now. So in 2021, from 2021 through 2023, the median rate increase projection is roughly around 1%. And through 2024, I'm going to annotate here. 2023, we see roughly around 1%. And then in 2024, we're seeing roughly 1.75%. And then beyond 2024, the projections are that we're going to see upwards of 2.5% to maybe even 3% increase in rates from where they're at right now. So this leads us to conclusion number 5, which is, as prices fall, the rising interest rates are likely to offset any buyer's gain from falling prices. For example, if prices fall 10%, which we can expect them to, actually, I would be very confident in saying that in some point over the next 36 to 48 months, we will see prices fall 10%. Rates increase 1.5% in tandem. Buyers are going to end up paying 5% more than they would have by buying before the pricing downturn. So that brings us all the way back to Cindy Way. So what we're learning is that all of us on this call have to be prepared to go above and beyond what we currently feel is reasonable in order to compete. This is a home. There's a proof is in the pudding. 2.45, all signs showed to 2.3 really being the answer. And we went all the way to 3 million. And I'm really not here, by the way, to fearmonger. I'm really doing this because I care about every single one of our clients, every single one of you on this call. The advice is simple. We either bite the bullet now, we either pay now, or it's only going to get worse later. Now, I have to say, this is the same advice that I gave my best friend, Tony, who's pictured right here. He roomed with me all 4 years at undergrad at Stanford. And literally just yesterday, him and his wife, Jackie, closed on their home. And I had the same conversation I'm having with all of you right now is the same conversation I had with them, which is it's going to feel like overpaying now. And it's going to feel like, oh my God, like that is an absurd price. In 3 months from now, they will look like geniuses. And the great news for everyone on this call is you can still come out of this market ahead. There is still time. As I mentioned before, we are at the beginning. We're at the precipice of this 90 to 120 day hyper appreciation cycle. So we still have plenty of runway. We still have plenty of time until we really get to that peak. And my word of advice for anyone on this call is that if you've been on the fence as to whether or not now is the right time, I hope that this was enough education for you to kind of come to the realization that even though it feels like now is not the best time ever in the world to buy, yes, you're right. The best time to buy was a month ago. But the next best time to buy, truthfully, after looking at all the data and looking at all the facts and just looking at this situation objectively, the second best time to buy is right now.